lecture of Bangabandhu lecture series. This is in continuation of a long series of lectures organized on the occasion of the celebration of the birth centenary of the father of the nation, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. Today, we are honored to have with us His Excellency Mr. Volkan Bozkir, the President of the UN General Assembly, who will kindly deliver today's keynote address in presence of our Honorable Foreign Minister, Dr. A.K. Abdul Momen, Honorable State Minister for Foreign Affairs, is also present here. The theme of today's lecture is Bangladesh and the United Nations. At the very outset, on this momentous occasion, let me take the opportunity to pay our deepest tribute to the greatest Bengali of all time, father of the nation, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, the prime architect of Bangladesh's independence. Distinguished guests, following the tradition of the lecture series, we will start today's program with the theme song of Mujibiyar, Tumi Banglar Dhrubotara. The song expresses that the founding father of Bangladesh, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman's immortal spirit beats within the hearts of every Bangladeshi. His guiding light illuminates the nation's progress towards a brighter future. You are cordially invited to enjoy the theme song, Tumi Banglar Dhrubotara.
আকাশে বাতাসে বজ্র কণ্ঠ তোমার কণ্ঠস্বর তুমি বাংলার ধ্রুবতারা তুমি হৃদয়ের বাতিঘর আকাশে বাতাসে বজ্র কণ্ঠ তোমার কণ্ঠস্বর তোমার স্বপ্নে পথ চলে আজ চেতনায় মহিয়ান
মুজিব তোমার অমিত সাহসে জেগে আছে কোটি প্রাণ
তোমার স্বপ্নে পথ চলে আজ চেতনায় মহিয়ান মুজিব তোমার অমিত সাহসে জেগে আছে কোটি প্রাণ তুমি বাংলার ধ্রুবতারা তুমি হৃদয়ের বাতিঘর আকাশে বাতাসে বজ্র কণ্ঠ তোমার কণ্ঠস্বর আমার জন্মভূমি বাংলা মায়ের রক্ত পলাশ হৃদয় পদ্ম তুমি তোমার নামে গর্বিত জাতি আমার জন্মভূমি তোমার সামনে পথ চলে আজ চেতনায় মহিয়া মুজিব তোমার অমিত সাহসে জেগে আছে কোটি প্রাণ তোমার সামনে পথ চলে আজ চেতনায় মহিয়া মুজিব তোমার অমিত সাহসে জেগে আছে কোটি প্রাণ তুমি বাংলার ধ্রুবতারা তুমি হৃদয়ের বাতিঘর
আকাশে বাতাসে বজ্র কণ্ঠ তোমার কণ্ঠস্বর
মধুমতি জলে স্মৃতির নাও ভাসে
তোমার মহিমা দিগন্তে দেখি মুক্তির নিঃশ্বাসে
পদ্মা মেঘনা মধুমতি জলে স্মৃতির নাও ভাসে
তোমার মহিমা দিগন্তে দেখি মুক্তির নিঃশ্বাসে
তোমার স্বপ্নে পথ চলে আজ চেতনায় মহিয়া মুজিব তোমার অমিত সাহসে জেগে আছে কোটি প্রাণ তোমার স্বপ্নে পথ চলে আজ চেতনায় মহিয়া সাহসে জেগে আছে কোটি প্রাণ তুমি বাংলার ধ্রুবতারা তুমি হৃদয়ের বাতিঘর আকাশে বাতাসে বজ্র কণ্ঠ তোমার কণ্ঠস্বর তুমি বাংলার ধ্রুবতারা তুমি হৃদয়ের বাতিঘর আকাশে বাতাসে বজ্র কণ্ঠ তোমার কণ্ঠস্বর
Distinguished guests, may I invite on stage Her Excellency Ms. Mia Sepu, the United Nations Resident Coordinator in Bangladesh, to say a few introductory words and introduce Mr. Boskir. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ms. Mia Sepu.
Respected Foreign Secretary, senior government officials, Ambassador of Turkey, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. In September 2020, we gathered in this same venue for the commemoration of the maiden speech by Sheikh Mujib at UN General Assembly in 1974. In his speech, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman wasn't just speaking to the nations present at the 29th session of the General Assembly, but to nations yet to be born and to the Bangladesh of the future. The breadth of the global vision of his words are equally relevant today as Bangladesh celebrates its 50 years of independence and as UN commemorated its 75th anniversary last year. The call of the Father of the Nation made at the General Assembly for better choices in the context of nuclear war remains just as relevant today in the context of the climate crisis. Today, the nations of the world are faced with critical choices, he said. He went on to add that the wisdom of these choices will depend whether humanity moves towards a world haunted by fear and massive human suffering marked by mass starvation, unemployment, and deepening poverty, or whether humanity can look to a future world where human creativity, science, and technology will be leveraged to shape a better future so that humans everywhere can begin to enjoy the minimal conditions of decent life. The recurrent theme of Bangabandhu's speech was peace and justice, not just as outcomes, but as values. He recognized that the aspirations of self-determination were similarly rooted in the values of peace and justice. In the same speech, Bangabandhu went on to add that peace can endure only if it's based on justice, and justice for him was linked to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Today, we see Bangladesh at 50 years of independence as one of the biggest troop contributing countries to UN peacekeeping, its continued engagement with the women, peace and security agenda, and the culture of peace resolution. The UN General Assembly continues to be the stage where world leaders meet. Even at this time of renewal of multilateralism, and search for a more inclusive and diverse UN, the convening power of the UN is beyond question. The Honorable Prime Minister of Bangladesh has used the UN General Assembly to outline the priorities of Bangladesh and issues that require multilateral solutions. In recent years, the Honorable Prime Minister has called, among other things, for zero tolerance for sexual exploitation and abuse by peacekeepers, and she has committed herself to the SG's circle of leadership. She has championed the course of the Global Compact of Migration, championed climate justice, called for COVID-19 vaccines to be treated as a global public good, and emphasized women's contribution being at the forefront of the pandemic response and recovery efforts. She has recognized the importance of leveraging science, technology, and innovation for closing the digital divide and mobilizing resources and technology transfers. And of course, she has called for and made suggestions for solutions to the Rohingya crisis. Today, we will hear directly from the convener of the World Stage, the 75th UN General Assembly. It is my great pleasure to welcome His Excellency Volkan Bozkır, President of the UN General Assembly, and your team to Dhaka and Bangladesh. I am sure President Bozkır will be comfortable here at the Foreign Service Academy of Bangladesh, having served in his Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Turkey for 39 years, including as the permanent representative of Turkey to the European Union, ambassador to Romania, Consul General in New York, and at the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. He has served and held senior positions advising heads of state and the government of Turkey. Following his diplomatic career, he was elected as member of parliament in 2011. During his 9 years in parliament, he served as the chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee, Minister for EU Affairs and Chief Negotiator, and in 2018, he was elected for the 4th time as the chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee of the Grand National Assembly of Turkey. Upon his election as president of the General Assembly last year at the height of the pandemic in New York, President Bozkır made it clear that business continuity was of utmost importance while navigating the COVID-19 pandemic. He has succeeded in safely convening the General Assembly and upholding all the mandates of the GA. Furthermore, he has convened a historical special session on COVID-19 and called for a fair and equitable access to COVID-19 vaccinations through his Vaccines for All campaign. Indeed, he has consistently called for renewed commitment to the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development in order to reduce compounded inequalities such as the digital divide. An international gender champion, he took the unprecedented step of creating a gender advisory group to mainstream gender equality throughout the work of the GA, following the high-level meeting he convened to commemorate Beijing +25. He has also prioritized climate change by hosting the first ever summit on biodiversity, and in coming weeks will convene meetings on oceans and desertification, land degradation, and drought. His commitment to promoting the rights and needs of the most vulnerable groups is demonstrated by his visits. Tomorrow, he will visit Cox's Bazar Rohingya camps, and recently he visited Syrian refugees on the Turkish-Syrian border. Indeed, I greatly welcome his commitment to move beyond the walls of the UN headquarters and reaching out to those at risk of being left behind so that he can bring their needs and highlight them at the General Assembly. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is my great honor to give the floor to His Excellency Volkan Bozkır, President of the 75th UN General Assembly.
The microphone is always surprised when see me. How can this person so tall be addressing through the microphone? But we will find a way. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I greatly appreciate this opportunity to participate in this Bangabandhu lecture series here at the Foreign Service Academy in Dhaka, the premier facility to train future diplomats. My sincere thanks to the government of Bangladesh for this invitation and to Mia Seppo on her team for providing a crucial link between the UN headquarters and its vital work here in the country. And also thanks for the wonderful words, which I don't think I deserve that much, but thank you so much. Bangladesh is an active and influential member in the United Nations. And I'm delighted to visit here on only my second overseas trip since assuming the presidency last September. We unfortunately had a horrible pandemic, which did not allow traveling, meeting, talking to each other in person, having conversations, doing some exchange of views, but life is slowly but surely coming back. And I think my visits are the sign that UN is not staying at home in New York, but UN is showing the flag throughout the world. And I think we have an obligation to the people working for the United Nations throughout the world. Over 200,000 UN workers, UN people are sacrificing their lives, are doing important work, working away from their families, but we have an obligation to go to where they are, talk to them, listen to them, and show that we are sharing the same difficulties and not from our homes in New York. So from the day I started office, my team was in the office. It wasn't the same everywhere. We were, as the president-elect, we start in a adjacent building in the UN headquarters, and it was deserted. We were the only persons in the building, and it was a shocking picture for me, seeing that people left even their sandwiches on the tables, as if there was a nuclear attack. And suddenly they went and didn't come for months. And there were rats, of course, enjoying the pleasure of eating sandwiches on the tables of the UN headquarters. But we were there. Then we moved into the UN headquarters. And I said, virtual meetings is not my favorite. So I will start in person. And I explained to my brothers several times this morning that when there's a virtual meeting, I had the first experience when I was doing my interactive dialogue from Istanbul. And it was the first gathering after the hardly hit New York people. It was in May. It was supposed to be 1 hour, but it took 2 hours and 40 minutes. And I stayed there answering every question, making all the statements, explaining my vision statement. But after the meeting, one of my colleagues said, "Why did you sit there for 3 hours and 40 minutes? I said, I had to be there. I had answered questions. I have to make my statements. He said, no, you don't know these virtual meetings. You normally answer some questions, then you go and have coffee with your wife, watch some soccer, come back, answer another 5 questions, and then you go have a nice walk, then come back. Then I made up my mind. I said, no, virtual meetings is perhaps a tool of communicating, but when I become the president, I will make sure that meetings will be in person. And until now, among the 68 official platforms of the United Nations, only the General Assembly is meeting in person. And I'm proud of that. And it's not because of me. I was perhaps the leading person, but it was together with the member countries, with the secretariat, and step by step, we came to the point that last week we had a General Assembly meeting on Palestine, where 14 ministers came. 1+1 seating was allowed. Journalists were running in the headquarters, accompanying delegations, security. So it was so lively that we really enjoyed the former days, which is now today in the United Nations. So we're looking forward to have this as the minimum in the General Assembly meetings. So we will build on it, and we hope that we will be able to see more ministers coming. And I invited my brother, the foreign minister, to one of the meetings to come to New York and show the Bangladeshi flag as the Minister of Foreign Affairs. I'll be happy to reciprocate the hospitality shown here in my so there are many synergies between my priorities in the 75th session of the United Nations General Assembly and the work interests of Bangladesh. Whether in relation to the situation of LDCs and LDC graduation, or COVID recovery and the attainment of the Sustainable Development Goals, gender equality and women's empowerment, and humanitarian action. I really, even before coming here or during the term, I worked with the very able PR of the Bangladesh in New York. I recognize this similarity in my priorities and the priorities of Bangladesh. But let me begin with COVID vaccines, because there really is no pressing issue facing this region and the world. From the earliest days of my presidency, I have emphasized the importance of fair and equitable distribution of vaccines. We were at a stage where we didn't know what to do. And the hope was not only on vaccines, but on many things. But slowly but surely, vaccines started to become the solution to this problem. And I recognize that there will be difficulties in the production, in the bottling, in the transportation, and in distribution. So in the COVID special session in December, I made this an issue in two panels. I invited scientists who produced the vaccines. I invited parliamentarians, people in the transportation sector, people in the banking sector, to discuss what the picture will be. And it was completely known there that if the vaccine was produced, it will not be fairly and equally distributed to the world. And my fear was that especially the countries and the people more in need will have less access to the vaccines. So from that day onwards, I started the campaign which says vaccines for all, which means equitable and fair distribution of vaccines to every part of the world without using this as a hegemonia element or isolating the own country, which has the production capacity, and until that country is satisfied, not giving a single dose to the other parts. So we are now actually facing that kind of a situation. I agreed with Bangladesh and others that COVID vaccines should be treated as a global public good. Indeed, this was the focus of many panels, including the meeting I mentioned, but a lot has happened since then, yet much more remains to be done. We have seen countries and the companies from across the world come together to invest in, develop, and bring to market multiple proven vaccines. Billions of dollars have been provided to multilateral mechanisms to procure and distribute vaccines. And yet, the picture we are seeing today is terrifying, horrifying. Only 0.3% of all vaccines have gone to low-income countries. This is really unacceptable. And this is against every moral, human belief we have. From the health worker in an LDC to a teacher in a refugee camp, to the elderly in care facilities across our countries, we must all be covered. The most vulnerable groups, people on the move in conflict zones, and those already marginalized, must be prioritized. Bangladesh has promoted solidarity throughout COVID-19 response, engaging actively in multilateral initiatives and helping its neighbors as well. With disruptions to commercial supply, it is clearly important that Bangladesh be included in the multilateral vaccine response, because we are not safe until we are all safe. If one country thinks that if I solve my problem, I will solve all the problem, that is wrong, because the others will bring back the difficulties we have been facing in the last year. So we must look at the forest instead of looking at the trees in the forest. If the forest is not secured, then trees will not mean anything. It is like giving water to the flowers in a forest when the forest is on fire. What will happen to your flowers if the fire is not stopped? Of course, COVID-19 is not just a health crisis. At the UN General Assembly special session on COVID-19 response, we heard from the ILO Director General that when the world came to a standstill, economic migrants around the world were left in limbo, resulting in remittances plummeting. The return of up to 1 million migrant workers to Bangladesh has highlighted this vulnerability. I understand Bangladesh is making significant efforts to scale up social protection systems with a focus on women, the ultra-poor, ethnic minorities, people with disabilities, and other vulnerable populations. You are treating gender equality as a strategic objective, including recognizing the need to tackle the scourge of gender-based violence, which spiked in so many of our countries during lockdowns. We're also promoting economic recovery through fiscal stimulus. I welcome the presentation by Bangladesh of its voluntary national review at last year's high-level political forum on sustainable development in New York, including the innovative data-driven SDG tracker. In this regard, I commend the efforts which have resulted in Bangladesh meeting the eligibility criteria for graduation from least developed countries status. The incentives for graduating are often perverse, but Bangladesh has demonstrated pride in its achievements and is the model for other countries seeking to move up the value chain while continuing to invest in people. I'm looking forward to your much anticipated graduation to reflect the vulnerabilities of COVID recovery and climate change. Speaking here in Dhaka, I would be remiss if I did not emphasize the importance of thoughtful stewardship of rapid urbanization. Well-planned, managed, and financed cities and towns can build resilience to mitigate the devastating impacts of shocks from health pandemics, climate change, economic downturns. If we fail to prepare for the increasing rate of urbanization, we will miss the mark in 2030. Ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, COVID-19 is the story of 2020 and 2021. But the existential threat of climate change remains. You are on the front line. Bangladesh's efforts to draw attention to the need for urgent global cooperation, including through your leadership of the Climate Vulnerable Nations Forum, are noteworthy. An increase in global warming, or if just 1% globally, risks flooding that would displace 40 million Bangladeshis by the end of the century. I welcome the government of Bangladesh's plans for low carbon industrialization. As a global leader on climate action, 2021 presents another important moment for Bangladesh, and it is COP26. Recent announcements by large carbon emitters of improved climate change commitments give hope that this year will see the course correction we need. On peace and security in the United Nations, Bangladesh is also a leader as the #1 contributor of police and troops to UN peacekeeping missions. Of the 175,000 personnel deployed to 54 peacekeeping missions across 5 continents since 1988, currently 6,608 Bangladeshis are serving in 9 missions around the world, including Central African Republic, Mali, Democratic Republic of Congo, Lebanon, Yemen, and South Sudan. My colleagues were worried today that the volcano eruption in the Democratic Republic of Congo might threaten the Bangladeshi peacekeepers there, and I will be very happy if nothing has happened to those brave people, and I'll be happy to announce it also tomorrow. These brave men and women leave their families behind in order to protect communities in need. I particularly pay tribute today to these peacekeepers who paid the ultimate sacrifice while serving under the blue flag of the United Nations. Peacekeeping remains one of the most innovative responses provided by multilateralism to the maintenance of international peace and security. Under the primary purview of the Security Council, peacekeeping is also an important track in the General Assembly. Its evolution over the years shows the capacity of the United Nations to adapt to new circumstances and come up with original proposals and solutions. Improving the way we deliver is a shared responsibility for the international community. To this end, I commend the engagement of Bangladesh in the General Assembly, where you have advocated for the importance of increased participation of women in the field of peace and security, including in senior positions for smooth transition from peacekeeping to peace building and to sustaining peace. You were an early advocate and supporter of the women, peace and security agenda, and you walk the talk. More broadly, it's critical that we work with all nations to instill a culture of peace in all its dimensions. Madam Prime Minister made this call for all, to embrace a culture of peace at the general debate this past September. This reflects work over 2 decades since the adoption of GA Resolution 53/243. In September this year, I will convene a high-level forum on culture of peace, as requested by the membership. I hope it will address the rise of hate speech and discrimination, which has increased significantly during this pandemic, as well as reinforce what we know, which is that gender equality and women's empowerment are fundamental to building and sustaining peaceful societies. I look forward to Bangladesh's participation in this event, and I trust that as Foreign Service officers, you will work to promote the spirit of a culture of peace. There is no more noble goal than the pursuit of diplomacy for peace. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, let me now turn to the issue of human rights and humanitarian action. I commend again Bangladesh for offering shelter and protection to the Rohingya, fleeing persecution and unspeakable crimes in Rakhine State. Bangladesh stepped up at a moment of crisis to uphold the principles of the United Nations when your most vulnerable neighbors endured their darkest hour. Please allow me, on behalf of the United Nations General Assembly, to thank you. History will define your actions as heroic. I remain deeply concerned about the humanitarian implications of the military's recent actions in Myanmar, and I join calls for an immediate end to violence. A year ago, the International Court of Justice ordered Myanmar to do everything possible to prevent a genocide against the Rohingya. This order retains its urgency and should not be forgotten as we face new challenges relating to the coup and its violent aftermath. The safety and security of the Rohingya and other minorities must be secured. Their basic rights, including the citizenship and the creation of conditions conducive to the voluntary, safe, dignified, and sustainable return of all Rohingya refugees and IDPs must be respected. Tomorrow, I'll visit Cox's Bazar, for I firmly believe we cannot speak on these issues from afar. The United Nations must continue to reach out to the people we serve. Ladies and gentlemen, it has been a distinct honor to speak with you here today. Bangladesh has promoted the ideals of the United Nations since its independence, going as far to make specific reference to respect for international law and the principles enunciated in the UN Charter in Article 25 of your Constitution. This is clear in your mission-driven approach to service, particularly at the United Nations in New York, where Her Excellency Rabab Fatima is an active and highly respected ambassador. She led the UNICEF Executive Board, the creation of the first ever General Assembly resolution on global drowning prevention, and works to end poverty and reduce inequalities as Vice President of the UNDP, UNFPA, and UNOPS Executive Boards. She's also chairing preparations for the LDC5 conference, as well as co-facilitating a crucial UN reform process that at its heart is about UN effectiveness and ensuring that the United Nations is able to meet the challenges of the day. Those of you who have worked with Ambassador Fatima know that she brings a dynamism and unique insight to all of her endeavors. When Madame Ambassador speaks, all in the room pay attention, as they paid attention to the minister when he was PR there, and to the undersecretary of the foreign ministry when he was PR there. We have excellent Bangladeshi diplomats who are serving their countries and to the international peace and security. Two of them are sitting here. One is with me in New York. As we contend with a multitude of challenges, including the parallel threats of COVID-19, climate change, and conflict around the world, I trust that you will take a leaf out of the book of Ambassador Fatima and pursue an energetic entrepreneurial style of diplomacy for peace. In conclusion, I understand that the dictum of Bangladesh's foreign policy is friendship to all, malice to none. At a time of great contestability and geostrategic rivalry, this positive and independent outlook should serve you well. You should cherish it and use it to forge a peaceful and prosperous path for your country, region, and the world. I commend you for your work, and once again, I thank you for your kind invitation here today and for the hospitality shown to me from the time I arrived this morning. Long live Bangladesh. Long live Bangladesh in peace, prosperity, and security.
Thank you very much, Excellency, for highlighting on some very critical issues involving Bangladesh and UN relationship. And we are grateful for your very encouraging words. And we look forward to continue being the peace-loving nation and helping others in distress. Distinguished guests, may I have the honor and pleasure to invite on stage Honorable Foreign Minister of the Government of Bangladesh, Dr. A.K. Abdul Momen MP, to deliver his kind remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our Honorable Foreign Minister.
Bismillah Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamu alaikum. His Excellency, Mr. Volkan Vazkir, President of the 75th session of the UN General Assembly, my colleagues, Excellencies, distinguished guests, and ladies and gentlemen. We are happy to receive His Excellency, Mr. Volkan Vazkir, the President of the General Assembly. His visit bears a special significance as it coincides with the celebration of two of the momentous events in our national history. We are in the midst of celebrating the birth centenary of the father of the nation, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. This year also marks the golden jubilee, our 50th anniversary of independence. We feel honored to have such a distinguished guest, an accomplished diplomat, a seasoned politician, as a speaker at today's Bangabandhu lecture series. Excellencies, the genesis of Bangladesh's multilateral engagement was rooted in the historic speech of the father of the nation, delivered in the United Nations General Assembly on 25th September 1974. His powerful pronouncement, and I quote, that Bengali nation fully commits itself to the building of a world order where the aspiration of all man for peace and justice will be realized, unquote, serves as a guiding principle for our engagement with the Global Assembly. Inspired by Bangabandhu's vision, Bangladesh has been partnering with the UN as a strong promoter of the world peace, active contributor to global development, and faithful upholder of the universal values of human rights. If we carefully analyze Bangabandhu's maiden speech at the UN General Assembly, it is evident that the speech was futuristic and forward-leaning. Many of the issues that Bangabandhu raised are as relevant today as they were at that time. That landmark speech represented the aspirations of our people and the needs of the newly independent Bangladesh. The foreign policy that we are pursuing today under the leadership of Bangabandhu's illustrious daughter, Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, emanates from the fundamental values of the policies espoused by the father of the nation, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Bangabandhu's peace-centric foreign policy dictum, friendship to all, malice to none, shaped our engagement with the United Nations. Together with the UN, we're working for a peaceful and prosperous world. Peacekeeping and peace-building are the eminent features of our foreign policy objectives. Bangladesh has consistently been one of the top troops and police contributing countries. The President has just mentioned this. We are one of the original proponents of the concept of culture of peace, promoting harmony across cultures and communities. Our abiding commitment to complete disarmament, including nuclear disarmament, is a manifestation of our peace-centric foreign policy, as espoused by the father of the nation in his maiden speech at the UN General Assembly in 1974. Climate change has been a persistent challenge faced by Bangladesh, and as we undertake different efforts to address this challenge, we are continuously inspired and guided by the Bangabandhu's emphasis on creating institutional framework, which he proposed back in 74. Bangladesh has always been a strong proponent of multilateralism. Bangladesh's early support for the Paris Accord on climate change and our leadership roles in the Climate Vulnerable Forum and the Global Center on Adaptation is a testimony to our unflinching commitment to multilateralism. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Bangladesh today is acclaimed as a role model for development, a star of women empowerment, a champion of the earth, and a standard bearer of the South. Our government has made exemplary achievements in implementing the MDGs, increasing women empowerment, enhances access to economic and social rights, achieving food security, and reducing inequalities. Our economic performance for the last 11 years has been stellar, leading the country to graduate from the LDC status. We're rightly on track to achieve the SDGs by 2030, despite the shocks of the pandemic, and become a developed country by 2041 and a prosperous delta by 2100. Excellencies, hidden in the long shadow of the COVID-19, the world is passing through a dark time. Many parts of the world, including our neighborhood, is battling a deadly second wave. Although multiple vaccines have now been developed, access to vaccines, particularly by the countries of the global south, has been dismal. We should not forget that the pandemic is such a crisis that necessitates vaccine made available for all. It should be a public good. The United Nations has a responsibility to ensure just and equitable distribution of vaccine so that we are not back to the square one. Ladies and gentlemen, today is 25th May, is the birthday of our national poet, Qazi Nazrul Islam, who made Kemal Atatürk, the founder of modern Turkey, a household name in Bangladesh. President Volkan Bozkır is from Turkey, and naturally, I was asked by some of my colleagues whether he is bringing some of the stars of the Sultan the Suleiman, the TV series that is very popular in Bangladesh, with him. Unfortunately, I had to tell them no, because he's here as the president of the General Assembly, and he has brought some of his colleagues, the team from the UN General Assembly. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, during this challenging time, the UN can guide us in charting a roadmap and shaping our future, where our security would be guaranteed, environment protected, development ensured, pandemics defeated, and human rights respected all across. On our part, we remain committed to working together with the United Nations to foster reinvigorated global action to ensure the future we want, leaving no one behind. Thank you very much. Joy Bangla, Joy Bangabandhu. I'd like to give two books to our president. One is written by our father of the nation when he was in jail, his unfinished memoir, and it's translated in Turkish language. so it would be easy for him. And then I have another one. Of course, that's my own personal book, is Bangladesh Marching Forward, a collection of articles and speeches.
Distinguished guests, with this, we have come to the end of today's event. Our sincere thanks to all for taking part in this important lecture and making it a cherishable one with your graceful presence. Our special thanks to His Excellency, Mr. Volkan Bozkir, the President of UNGA, for his very thought-provoking keynote speech. We wish him a very enjoyable stay in Bangladesh. Teşekkür ederim, Excellency, and we want you to come back in Bangladesh again and again. Thank you all. Thank you.